everyone, my name is Matt, and today we'll be talking about the ships of the Imperial Navy. A little bit about myself. Many moons ago, I went to Texas A&M. I left Texas A&M. I joined the Navy. I got my bachelor's. After I left the Navy, I got my bachelor's in International Affairs at George Washington University, and now I'm working on my master's in history. As is the standard disclaimer, this is all my opinion and no one else's. So and I would also like to preface this by saying I do not support blowing up planets as a way to enforce the central government's will. Although you may think that when I talk about this a little bit later on. I really don't, I promise. What's the origin of this? Well, in November 2017, I saw a presentation at the Navycon, and there's a guy who said that the Galactic Empire did not structure its navy very well for its duties, because it only had these big, mile-long Star Destroyers, and that offended both my inner node and my outer node. By then Rogue One had been out, Rebels had been on TV for a while, and even after all the post-Disney, the new canon, there's still a lot of evidence of other ships in the Imperial Navy. The fact of the matter is, the Imperial Navy has a lot of ships, small, medium, and big, and performing a lot of duties. And in this piece, I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of core facts about what the main challenges that the central government is facing. Broadly speaking, the three size classes of ships. And then I'm going to talk about the high-low mix or low-high mix, might be better. Some of you United States Navy, post-war United States Navy history guys may kind of know what that's all about. Then I'm going to talk about where they are and and what the point of all this was. Well, like I said, there's a couple key facts. If you're familiar with the word systems theory of international relations, the idea is that you have, on planet Earth, you have kind of a core group of countries or regions, and you have a semi-peripheral group of countries, and then you got the kind of very periphery countries. The core ones are the important ones, semi-periphery are not nearly as important, and the periphery ones are really not important at all. If you were to take that and apply to the galaxy far, far away, henceforth the galaxy, you would have an almost perfect matchup. You have the core worlds, the mid-rim, the outer rim. Core worlds are the highly industrialized worlds, and you got the mid-rim, then you have the outer rim. The Galactic Empire before the Battle of Yavin was fundamentally a federal body, more like Imperial Germany than the Third Reich. It had the systems and sectors sometimes had their own defense forces. They conducted their own local law enforcement. And some of these system defense forces were big enough they could gift vessels to rebel groups in the outer rim. For an example, this Hammerhead corvette was gifted to, at the Battle of Sharif, was one of the three that was gifted to the Lothar sector insurgency by the Kingdom of Alderaan. So the primary threat to the central government were these very wealthy core worlds, not the outer rim rebels. It doesn't matter if there's a dozen Tatooines. What matters is what does Corellia think, what does Changelia think, what does Kuat think, what does Alderaan think. So even though you have this kind of dispersed, decentralized law enforcement, the Imperial Navy still had kind of a full spectrum of ship sizes. You got small boys, you got Star Destroyers, and you have these big Navy-wide, galaxy-wide strategic assets. So I'm going to kind of briefly go over some of the small boys. And all these are ships that have been on the screen. You have Gazanti-class cruiser operating as a very light CV. You have an Aquitans cruiser that started in the Clone Wars in the Republic Navy. You have an Interdictor-class cruiser. Sometimes it's classed as a Star Destroyer. I'm kind of classing it in a small boys group because of its main duties. And then you have the escort carriers. You see all these on the screen, not just in video games, but also in Rebels. And allegedly, some of these are in the battle over Exegol and Rise of Skywalker. I haven't been able to find a good picture. There's a picture of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and only talk about, what's in Rebels. in terms of small ships. Then you have the Star Destroyers. These are the ones that allegedly are the only ships that exist according to a certain commander in the United States Navy. There are no fewer than 4 Star Destroyers, and so it's throughout the Imperial Navy, not counting the variations and not counting very large star dreadnoughts like the Executor and Anarchy classes. These ships operated as independent cruisers. Think of the Age of Sail when you had these frigates that would go off by themselves for months and years at a time. And we had at least 4 classes of them. On the big screen, we had the Venator, which is the class that the Republic used towards the end of the Clone Wars. We have the Tector, which is at the Battle of Endor, and then we have the Imperial class. We also have the Victory, which I haven't seen on the big screen, but it's so common throughout, the written media and games that can't leave it out. It's there. It's canon, guys. Then we have the big strategic Navy-wide assets. Star Destroyers such as the Executor and Anarchy class, torpedo spheres, and Death Stars. All of these, by the way, except for the Executor class, they kind of really only have one job, and that job is to break planetary sieges. Going back, talking about who do we need to worry about in terms of laying siege to, because it ain't Tatooine. Tatooine's easy to deal with. So, if we were to talk about some examples of the low and high mix, I feel that it's important to kind of bring up an example of a low mix vessel, the Galactic class frigate, cruiser. Started life as a Syrian freighter. We saw it in the Phantom Menace flying around in the background, outside of Mos Espa. It has lived on though as a multi-role platform that can act as a 4-ship merchant aircraft carrier, doing random patrol stuff for maritime interdiction. It can land stuff directly into a hot LZ, and it's also an AGI. If the LCS could do a quarter of that, the U.S. Navy would be very well off indeed, but it can't, and we aren't. It can basically do patrol work, which is fine, but it isn't as useful as we had hoped. It isn't any more useful as, say, this Galactic class cruiser is for the Imperial Navy of the Galactic Empire. There's a picture of it as an AGI. There's a picture of it landing AT-ATs directly into an LZ. This thing is shorter than the cruiser that I was on out of San Diego. So you can get they get a lot of stuff out of this one hull type. So we had the low mix. Now we got the big mix, the high mix. The complaint was about stories about how they're too expensive, but really they aren't. The high mix is the Death Star. It's big, expensive. It's a massive use of resources. And that's the whole thing. So much resources went into these things, and a lot did. And for at least 2 of them, maybe 3. The great weapon at the end of Revenge of the Sith has some striking visual differences than the other 2 Death Stars. But the galactic economy is so big that you can build multiples of these things in the boonies, in secret, away from the industrial centers of the core. And it's difficult to even notice, much less track down the location of construction for this. The galactic logistics chain is that big, and this isn't something that we can just infer just from this. The one Jedi Master, Sifo Dyas, pulled money from the Jedi Council's petty cash to order several million, clones and hundreds of transgalactic assault transports, and no one noticed that this happened until over a decade had gone by, at the Jedi Council. So next time you read something about how the DoD can't find, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of money being spent, well, it appears to be a universal problem. The Death Star itself was very much opposed by the Admiralty. Grand Admirals Thrawn and Savid failed to prevent the construction of thousands of Star Destroyers. It can only be in one spot At a certain point, the idea is at a certain point you need holes, more hole numbers in order to have control. The problem is that having a force presence in the Outer Rim wasn't the main goal of the central government of the Galactic Empire. Who cares if Tatooine decides it doesn't want to be part of the Galactic Empire? What we do care if Alderaan decides it's going to leave. And when we try to bring it back in, because we don't have, and we have to use Force Dude because we don't have a secret police of psychic wizards to convince the Viceroy to stand down. A months or year-long siege with dozens or hundreds of Star Destroyers while the rest of the galaxies watching the Imperial Navy, we kind of bumble around, this planet with its shield. It isn't a good look. It doesn't make the central government look strong. On the land, you can just crack that open with one shot. Make it clear to the world governments that, you're stuck in here with me forever. A case we made, that's probably more useful than dozens or hundreds or thousands of Star Destroyers. I'm not saying it's especially ethical to go around blowing up planets of tens of billions or hundreds of billions or trillions of people on it, but there is a reason behind the use of such a ship, and even tell you what it is. It's to keep the star systems in line, the worlds in line, not the feel of the Death Star. So where are all these ships? Well, first of all, as the book says, space is big. It's really, really big. It's mind-boggling big. So with that in mind, it isn't too difficult to see that you may not actually see a lot of these ships at any given time. Admiral Ozzel, I believe it was, just flat out kind of discounted that there could have been rebels on Hoth, precisely because there was so many, unmarked colonies out there. That's how big it was, how big space is, and to kind of build on that, the in-universe explanation would be that most of the stuff on the big screen is taking place in the Outer Rim. There's only two instances of being in the core during the Imperial era movies. When the Millennium Falcon is trying to drop Kenobi off at Alderaan, and when we see Solo going up on Corellia. That's it. Everything else happens in the Outer Rim. Outer Rim is far away from the naval bases and from the industrial centers. You kind of need these big ships that can do independent cruiser missions. Keep in mind that these Kuat and Vendeli designs were the first transgalactic warships in hundreds of years. In the Clone Wars, the Separatists used modified long-haul cargo ships as warships. If you want a more prosaic answer, well, Hollywood blockbusters focus on hero ship classes like battleships, aircraft carriers, and submarines. Not many Coast Guard cutters and minesweepers, the USS Kane notwithstanding. Same with visual media for Star Wars, the big, Disney and Lucasfilm want to get people out there to see big battle, and not as big as I would have liked in most recent couple of movies, but, see big battle and then go. These unsexy Gazantes with AGIs that conduct cyber warfare when a rebel group is trying to, break into a base somewhere. That's for the TV show. That's for rebels. Which is a great TV show. You ought to watch it if you haven't. So what's the point of all this? Well, it was fun. It was great. I love it. I don't know who doesn't love stuff like this. On the other hand, I work with system engineers mostly, so my exposure with people may be different from yours. If you want a practical reason, applying your analytical thinking to these fictional stories is a harmless way to kind of conduct a thought exercise. Who knows? Maybe something will get knocked loose if you look at rebels in the Lothal sector who are being equipped with ships from a state, in this case the Principality of Alderaan, the Kingdom of Alderaan. I can't remember which. Maybe something will click about naval militias in the South China Sea. Who knows? If you want kind of something even more broader, science fiction, fantasy, frequently use historical test cases, reskin for storytelling. Sometimes it's a bit on the nose, sometimes it's more subtle. That is part of a shared experience with humanity. That's how we interact with people. There were some people who there were anthropologists who seriously say that the only shared experience with anyone, universally, from a New Guinea Highlander to a Wall Street financier, is the gift. You give gifts to people. That's the only thing that's universal. Well, and the reason why it's so important is because it's a shared experience no matter what. History is a shared experience. Shared experiences are what make people work together and talk with people and build bonds with people. It's important. It's important. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed my presentation. If you have any questions, please send them to either Ian or Claude. They'll know how to get them to me. And thanks and gig 'em, and raise high.